Hello, welcome. I'm not going to waste any time waffling on at the beginning. I'm just going to go straight in and talk about factorization. So, first one you need to know about is the difference of two squares. Now, this looks like this, and it factorizes this way. X squared minus y squared equals x minus y, x plus y. You must know that. You can guarantee that this will come up in every single GCSE paper ever. Now, to apply this, you might have something like x squared minus 25, in which case you just write x minus 5, x plus 5, because 5 squared equals 25. It could be the other way around, where you have something like 49 subtract p squared. And then you have to recognize that 49 is 7 squared, so this is 7 minus p times 7 plus p. Okay, now one that's slightly harder might be something like x squared minus 25 y squared. And here you have to recognize that 25y squared is actually 5y times 5y. So this itself is a squared term. And so this becomes x minus 5y, x plus 5y. Okay, now that's difference of two squares. That's one of the major factorizations you need to know. Now the other one, I would say, is what we would just call a common factor. So this is also going to be a two-term expression, and in its most basic case, you might get something like 2x plus 6. Okay, nice and easy, and you just got to look for the common factor. And in this case, it's just 2. So 2 goes into 2x. And how many times does 2 go into 6? Well, it's 3. So that's, at its most basic, common factor sort of factorization. Now, we can make this a bit harder, for example, with this. And in this case, it's no different, really. We're just looking for the common factors and writing them at the front. So we've got 9 and 3, so we pick 3. Goes into both of those. And then a squared and a cubed. You could say a is a common factor, and it is, but we can do better than that. A squared is also a common factor. So you pick the a squared here. It's effectively the lowest power. And then with the b's, you just write down b because there's a b here. And then this becomes 3, just 3. And then what's this one? A times b to the power of 6. And then that is factorized. So you just have to go through term by term to factorize. So that's two-term common factor expressions. Those are the other type that come up. Now, this could be a three-term expression, but for vast majority of questions, they're going to be two-term expressions like this. And to add to that list, I think one more thing is worth mentioning, which is something like x squared minus 5x. This is often confused with general quadratics, where people want to write out two brackets. And it's certainly not difference of two squares. In fact, this is actually just where you've got a common factor. So this is x brackets, and then you can write down x minus 5. So do remember that things like this have a common factor. And now the only other type of factorization left is quadratics. So let's just talk about these briefly. Now, ideally, you can just factorize something like this. You look at it and you think, okay, what two numbers multiply to give minus 4 and add up to give minus 3? And you think, it could be minus 4 and plus 1. So then you write down x minus 4, x plus 1. But I'm assuming that if you're watching this video, you might not be too comfortable doing this all the time, and you might want another method. And if you get a question like this to factorize, this is where it gets a bit harder. And I appreciate that not everyone might be comfortable just picking two numbers that multiply to give 7, and it doesn't quite add up to give 5. It's a bit more complicated now because we've got a 2x squared. So for this type of factorization, what I'm going to suggest is if if you want, it's optional this, but this is just an approach you might find useful, and that is you can actually use a calculator. Now it's kind of cheating. I'm not keen on doing this from a mathematical point of view. I'm very against it, really, particularly if you want to do A-level or any further maths study. However, if you just want to sort out your GCSE for now, what you can do is press menu, down, down, right, equals, and then press 2, 2, and you've got your equation solving mode. I'll just show you briefly how we could do this. So this previous example, x squared is just 1x squared. So you just type in 1 and equals, and then minus 3, you type in minus 3, and then you type in minus 4. And when you press equals, it tells you 4 is an answer and minus 1. Now that's important because if 4 is a solution, then x minus 4 is a factor, hence the x minus 4 here. And if minus 1 is a solution, then x plus 1 is a factor. Now we can do the same thing on this expression here. So if instead we put in 2 minus 5 minus 7 and press equals, we now get 7 over 2 and minus 1. So we'll write those down. We've got x equals 7 over 2 and x equals minus 1. Now the problem is here that you can't factorize this by writing x minus 7 over 2. It's not quite right. We actually need to get rid of the fraction. So you have to double it. Effectively, if you rearrange this, it actually becomes 2x minus 7. So instead of x minus 7 over 2, you just have to double it to make it 2x minus 7. And then the other bracket is going to be x plus 1. Okay. Now this approach, as I say, it's not the ideal approach. I'm not too keen on it. However, I do accept that it is a valid approach that will work if you're completely stuck and you can't factorize these any other way. So just one more example, 6x squared plus 5x minus 6, and you're completely stuck here. Again, there's a lot of options if you try to factorize this by inspection, which is how I would normally do it. And actually, by inspection, I just mean what I did before, basically just guessing numbers until they work. If you just do 6, 5 minus 6, press equals, it tells you 2/3 and minus, so you've got 2/3 and minus 3 over 2. So basically then you go, okay, well if x equals that, we have to multiply that by 3, essentially. If you rearrange this, you get 3x minus 2 as your factor. So we can write 3x minus 2. And then in this case, if you double it and then make it this positive, you get 2x plus 3. Okay, so if you find that method is actually more complicated, then don't do it. Just try and factorize it normally. But you know, if that's helpful, then great. Okay, so just to summarize what we've done, this is a piece of paper that I was using to prepare this. We had basically two types of factorization to start with, which was when you've got two-term expressions, that is difference of two squares and a common factor. And then we had three-term expressions where you can use a calculator and press basically menu, find that one, 2, 2, and then you're ready to go. And then, but I said I was going to do this briefly. Yeah, I'll just talk about that very briefly, which is that you can combine these techniques a bit. So for example, you start off by saying there's a common factor here because we've got x as a common factor. So you put x brackets x squared to get the x cubed minus 36. And then we're not done. So typically if it was this question, it would say factorize fully. And then you can go a step further because this is now difference of two squares. So it's x minus 6, x plus 6. Okay, and then that's fully factorized. So it's just to say that sometimes you can have multiple steps involving these. But as long as you're good at each individual process, you should be fine. Anyway, I hope that's helpful, and maybe see you in another video. Bye-bye. I just wanted to talk about one quick thing, which is when you've got a minus sign at the front. I thought it was a lot quicker for me to just do it using a screen recording. What I would suggest you do is actually take out a minus sign at the front first. If you do this, then basically you can just do the usual thing and factorize the positive bit. So basically all the negative terms become positive and the positive terms become negative. So we actually write down inside here plus 19x and minus 5. And now use your calculator if you want to just do the usual thing. So if you do that, you get x is a quarter. And if you write down x is a quarter somewhere over in the corner, then you can rearrange that to 4x equals 1. 4x minus 1 is 0. So we put here 4x minus 1. Then we just have to work out the other bracket. And that was, the calculator will tell you again that x is minus 5. And so that means x plus 5 is here. And that's just fully factorized now. Now I say this because if you didn't use the minus sign at the front here, then the problem is the calculator would just give you this answer without that minus sign. And so that wouldn't be quite correct. So just be aware that you should put a minus sign at the front and then factorize the whole thing if that ever came up. I think it's quite rare for that to happen, but just thought I'd say.